modifier already, but let's talk more detail about what static means in Java. So with static modifier, attributes, which are the variables, and methods belong to the class rather than an object. Remember, an object was a member of a class. Static method means that it can be accessed without creating an object of the class. So let's look at the static variables first. If you declare a variable static, it is a variable shared by all instances of the class. Here's an example. So we have a class A, which is an integer x3. So x here is an instance variable, which also means that it is a member of an object. And we also have static integer y4, and then y here is static, which also means that it's a member of the class, not a specific instance or object. What does that mean? That means if we have an A1, which is an instance or an object of class A, we also have A2 is a separate object, also member of class A. But here, if we change ay.x to 5, which means that we change only a1's x, not a2's x. So both a1, a2 has their own copy of x. However, if we change a1, y of a1 to 5, that changes y both for a1 and a2 because y is not specific to a1 or a2, it belongs to the class. So it changes for every member of the class. So we're going to see more examples, but let's talk about static methods as well. So if you declare a method static, it can be called independently of any object through its class name. Here's an example. So we have a calc class, which is a static integer add that takes a and b, returns a plus b. So to use this method, we do not need to create an object of calc. We can just say calc.add and pass two arguments and it will return a. So we can create an object, but we don't have to. So let's see some examples. So let's look at our calc class again. Remember, we had two overloading add methods and two overloading average methods. So let's say that we want to make the average static. So, and I'm going to do both of them. Okay. So what does that mean? It means that the add methods are still not static, which means they're member of the object or the instance. Average will be member of the calc class. So it means that I can, in order for me to use add either of them, I still need an object C, so I can call by object. However, for average, that's not the case anymore. So I can say calc dot average. I can say calc dot average. So the average does not need to be called by an object. You can call by the class directly. So, and let's run and see what happens. There you go. So it works as expected. So try to access add from the, notice that since it is a separate class than calc demo, you can't just say add, it's not going to work. But also if you say calc dot add, this is not going to work either. So if I try this, you're going to get an error. Or I didn't save it yet. Okay, let's try again. So what does it say? Cannot be referenced from a static context. All right, so the reason is add is not static. Okay, so I'm going to go on make an object c.add. What if I call this with object average? Should this work? So it does work. So which means that the static methods can be called through the object, but it can also call through the class. So either way, it should work. Okay. As static attributes, I will create a class circle. So in my circle class, I have a static double pi, which is 3.14, and I have a double radius. So a double here is an instance variable. So what does that mean? Let's create an object. So we're going to create circle C1. So C1 is a member or an instance of circle. Okay. So another instance, C2, will be a new circle as well. Okay. So I can go ahead and I can say C1 dot radius is 10, and then C2. Remember, there are two separate radii for C1, one copy for C1, one copy for C2, and that could be 20. Okay, so changing one does not affect the other. So, however, if I say C1, say I want to change the pi number. So initially pi was set to 314, but I can go ahead and change that to say 314, 15, 9. So I can have more precision in my pi number. So let's print C1 pi. So remember that I only changed it for C1, but you're going to notice that the value was changed for C2 as well. So let's go ahead and test this. So I'm going to say okay, Java. Did you notice that? So although I only changed for C1, C1.py was changed, but if I print C2.py, it's also different. The reason is that pi is a static, so it's shared by all of the members. So another way to access pi, since because it's the member of the class itself, I can say, notice I can say circle.py, right? Because there is only one pi, which is this one, and it belongs to the circle class. So that's why I can access through circle, except that we need to correct the spell circle. So notice this. I'm going to set this, and then we need to run. And also both C1.py and C2.py is the same. Why don't we go ahead and change? I'm going to remove one value, so 3.1415. Let's see what happens. Do you expect both to be updated or one or none? So the answer is both were updated. Okay, that's how you could use static instance variable. Okay, so why is that important? In my next demo, I'm gonna go over how we can use static variable for account demo. Another way of using static class members. Say I have an account 1, account 2, and account 3 from the previous example, and they each have their own copy of their balance and account name, right? But what I want to do is I want to give each account an account ID, which will be unique. So each new account will take the next ID. How do I do that? I can create ID as static integer ID. Okay, and then for the to start, I can say my first account should be 100, and then anything comes after that should the first account that I create should take 100, and the following ones should this value be increased, and then we should get a new one. Okay, so I can also say an integer account ID, which is not set yet. So how we're going to use the static ID to create an individual ID, account ID for each of the account instances. So to do that, I'm going to say each time I call the constructor. So the problem here is that we have to write the same thing in 3 places. There's a better way to do, but let's say I'm only gonna do this. So I'm going to do this in here. So for this example, we're going to assume that we don't even have this guys. So a later lesson, I'll show you how to do it one place. So when I create an account, I'm going to say set the balance, okay, but also set account ID to ID. Then what? So increase ID by 1. Okay. So which remember all of the accounts will share this ID. So when I create my first account, I'm gonna use this ID 100 to create my individual account ID or unique account ID. Then I'm gonna increase that. So next time I call that, I'm going to have the ID be 101, 102, 103. So to test this, so I'm going to create 3 accounts, all with the same, okay, because I only have it in this constructor, which doesn't have a parameter. So using those 2 constructors, you will not have an individual account ID. So account 1, account 2, account 3. So what we expect is this account 1 dot account ID will be 100. Account 2 dot ID will be 101. Account 3 dot ID will be 102. So let's go ahead and test that. Okay, Java account demo. So first account 100, second account 101, and third account 102. All right, so you can go ahead and try this with your class demo, where you can have an static variable for class name, class serial number, or something. Each time you create a new class, you should have a unique class barcode, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so your turn.